Hello friends, my name is Olivia. I make videos about books on the internet, and today's video is going to be just my reading wrap up from the months of May and June. I read 7 books and I want to get through this quickly because I feel like the last videos on my channel have been kind of long, so we're just going to jump right into it. The first book that I read in the month of May was The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I talked about this book in my last video, which was my favorite books of all time. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Every time I read this book, I'm just so blown away by the beauty of the prose and the construction of the story. It is lush, it is magical, and it is heartbreaking, and it is always a 5 out of 5 star read for me. The next book that I read in the month of May was Universal Harvester by Joan Darnielle. This is a very bizarre plot in the way that only he can write. We kind of start off with our main character, Jeremy, who works at a video hut. It's like it's the late 90s in Iowa, and people begin to return videos to him with this kind of cryptic complaint that there's something else on the videos. And he kind of investigates and discovers all these videos that have these really bizarre, kind of scary, kind of creepy clips on them. And he and some of his coworkers and friends kind of try to get to the bottom of this mystery. It is part like X-Files, it's part creepy mystery, while at the same time being so beautifully written and kind of having this beautiful story woven throughout about like motherhood and the challenges of motherhood and the damage that family can leave upon us. There's also a beautiful rumination of grief in this novel. That description of the plot is kind of the base level of what this book is. It goes so much deeper as the story goes on. Yes, it is creepy, mysterious at times, but it is also very beautiful and very touching, and it goes places that I did not expect whatsoever. I think it's a really great book to jump into not knowing a lot about. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars for characters, 4 out of 5 stars for plot, 5 out of 5 stars for prose, 4 out of 5 stars for impact, and 5 out of 5 stars for originality, so overall a really good 5-star read. The next book I read in the month of May was Spinster, Making a Life One's Own by Kate Bolick. This is kind of part memoir, part research in a sense. Kate Bolick is someone who has always had trouble staying in relationships, in the sense that she's always been enthralled by this idea of spinsterhood, of this idea of being single and being independent. This book gives us a memoir of her time in certain relationships and how those feelings have affected it, but it also just takes us through 5 women that have been really influential in her life, 5 writers, 5 figures from the past who could be qualified as spinsters. I found myself thinking about this book a lot after I finished reading it. The memoir part was great, and I really loved the really honest and simple way that Kate wrote about her life. She wasn't trying to prove anything about spinsterhood or about relationships. She was just really reflecting internally on who she is as a person and what she needs. But what I honestly loved most was the research and care she put into describing these 5 women she talks about. They were fascinating women I hadn't really heard of, but realized that I knew some of their work or knew some of their writings and realized it had a lot of impact on the world that I wasn't always conscious of. And I just kind of fell in love with these 5 women as this book went on, and now I have these 5 figures of my own to research and look into and gain some inspiration from. So for me, the value in this book really comes from how well she depicted these women and how well she celebrated women who are a little unconventional. I amend my rating system for memoirs a little bit because it feels weird to rate memoirs on like originality or things like that. So I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars for prose, 4 out of 5 stars for pacing, and 4 out of 5 stars for impact, so overall a 4-star read. The next book I read is another memoir, The Autobiography of Malcolm X. This is Malcolm X's autobiography, and he really takes the time to take you through his entire life, through childhood all the way up to when he is writing this book. I am just so grateful that this book exists, which might seem like a weird way to put it, but the insight that Malcolm X provides into politics, into society, into race issues in America is so timeless, is so powerful and fascinating. It was such a intense experience to read his prose, which was so passionate and so fiery, and to begin to get into his mind and understood the way that he saw race in America and also understood the way he constructed himself as this very public figure. It is incredibly passionate, incredibly fiery, and as cliche as it sounds, it really made me think a lot about these topics he's talking about. And I hope that this is a book that we keep reading and rereading as Americans, because what he's saying about race in America still applies today, and just the way that he puts it and his intelligence and the power of his prose is fascinating. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars for prose, 3.5 out of 5 stars for pacing, because it is a little bit slow because he goes through his entire life, and I was really eager to get to the political aspects of it, but the early parts of his life are still a really fascinating look at culture of the time. And then I gave it 5 out of 5 stars for impact, of course. The next book I read this month was another memoir, kind of. It was The Year of Magical Thinking by Joan Didion, but the play version, the play that is based off of her memoir. This is a play that goes through Joan Didion's experience of losing her husband and her daughter in the same year. So it's incredibly intense. and it wasn't really for me. I was kind of looking for a memoir that gave me a lot of time to think about grief and the role it plays in our life. I didn't actually realize this was the play version when I ordered it, so it's a lot shorter than the memoir. And she includes an excerpt from her memoir in the play that I thought was really beautiful and interesting. But because the play is so short and because it is a play, it's really just focused on the details of this tragedy and the immediate after effects. And it was super hard to read, which I know is the point. I bawled my eyes out the entire time, and I was hoping there would be some space in the memoir to give me a break from sobbing and to give me some chance to kind of think about grief as a concept and just not be so bogged down by the kind of triggering language of grief. But it really wasn't there in this memoir. This is a very personal opinion on my part. I saw a lot of Goodreads reviews that were really positive and found this book to be a comfort. I found it really, really hard to read. If you were someone who's experienced grief in your life, I would give fair warning before reading it, because for me, it just dredged up a lot of memories and emotions without really giving me a place to kind of put them or resolve them. And I know that's not Joan Didion's job in this play, and I totally admire her bravery in writing this. Just personally, it was not what I needed at the time. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars for prose because her prose is beautiful, 2.5 out of 5 stars for pacing, kind of to deal with the issues I had about it just being entirely about this tragedy and no room to breathe, and then 3 out of 5 stars for impact because it did impact me, just not in a really positive way. That being said, I will continue to read other works by hers, and I think I would like to pick up the memoir that this play is based on. The next book that I read is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is a reread for me. Another book I mentioned in my last video of my favorite books. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I don't have a lot to say about it because there's too much to say. This book follows Blue Sergeant and a group of boys she becomes friends with in their quest to discover the dead body of a lost Welsh king, because legend says that if you discover this body, you are granted one wish. And the journey is kind of spearheaded by one boy in particular, Gatsby, but every single character in this group has their own connection to magic and grows so much throughout this book and this series and becomes so much more invested in this quest in ways they could not anticipate. I'm not going to ramble because I want this video to be short. Everything about this book I think is flawless and beautiful, and it still impacted me to this day. I love it. The last book that I read this month is another book that I mentioned in a recent video, and that is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. I talked about this in my unfinished series video. This is a book I've owned for a very long time and just wanted to finally give it a try, and I am so glad I did. This book is awesome. This book takes place in a kind of alternate version of London where clairvoyance exists. Clairvoyance people have different kind of powers and psychic abilities, if you will. Their abilities kind of deal with the ether, which is this area of this astral plane where spirits kind of exist. In this version of London, clairvoyants are basically illegal, and they're hunted down and tracked down by the government, and our main character, Paige, is a very, very rare type of clairvoyant who works for one of the kind of underground clairvoyant gangs in London. And one day she is kidnapped and taken to an area of London she thought no longer existed. She finds out that the government she lives in is actually being kind of governed, essentially it's a puppet government, by this otherworldly race called the Rephaim, I don't know how to say it, who look like humans but are not human, and they are using clairvoyance and using this government to kind of enact their own will and using clairvoyance for their own power and their own abilities. And Paige is stuck in essentially this prison, and she has to try and find people to align with and find ways to escape and to kind of bring justice to the clairvoyants who are stuck here as well. This book floored me in terms of its creativity and imagination. There's so much history built into this novel that she brings in about this entire world, about clairvoyants themselves. Her ambition is just absolutely mind-blowing. You're so aware of it the entire time. And I also really love this book as well. I might do a full review on it because I have a lot of thoughts to say. I think that she constructed really believable characters that you want to root for. I think the world itself was fascinating. I thought that her writing style managed to make you feel very excited and produced a lot of really great action scenes while still having a very beautiful tone and very mature and sophisticated quality. Yeah, I might do a full review because I have a lot to say, but I'm so happy I picked this book up and I cannot wait to continue with the rest of the series. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of May and June. My reading has been really picking up lately. I've been feeling very inspired to read, so I'm super excited to share whatever books I do end up reading in the month of July. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any thoughts on these books, any things you want to share, any opinions, I would love to hear them. If you want to hear more thoughts, if this video was too short, I am putting up reviews for all of these books as I go on, so feel free to check out my Goodreads. It's linked down below. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I will talk to you guys soon with another video. Mwah.